In this video, I am going to go over instructions for aligning the Volkswagen high security key kit on the Sidewinder 2. First thing we would do, if we needed to align our kit, and remember most machines will come with a Volkswagen kit already, unless you've ordered it without. This kit would typically be adjusted from the factory. There's really no need to adjust it unless something happens to the machine or possibly you change vices. But anyway, if you do need to adjust it, in our owner's manual, it tells us Volkswagen high security internal 2-track. Here's the kit number. Cutter and guide we're going to use is a 3mm, so the GHMS 3M guide, and we always use a guide. We don't use a cutter for aligning the kit, we just use the guide. One difference here, other than every other kit, we are going to use the vise set for Volkswagen. Have a little bit of space and depth information here. If we ever needed to measure the cuts on the key, we could tell where we were cutting. It tells us our setup key is cut to all number 1 shallow depths except for the first cut at the bow. The first cut at the bow is cut to a number 4 depth, and follow the alignment procedure in the book, which we're going to cover. Typically on your machine, your A and B vices are installed. Our Volkswagen vices have got a V stamped into the face of them, and so I'm just going to install those really quick. I've already got the right side vise installed. A few other things I've done already to prepare to adjust the kit. I've removed the chip guard from the right side of the machine. I've also removed the 2 small Allen screws, the one in front of the vise that locks the hub for the depth rod, and the one that locks the hub for the space rod. With the Volkswagen kit, as we saw in the instruction manual, we're going to use our 3mm guide. So give myself a little bit of room here, and we'll install the 3mm guide right here in the right collet. And again, all we need to do is make sure that there's enough room above the vices. So it's kind of arbitrary as to where we put that guide and lock it in place, as long as there's some room above the vices. Next step would be to lock I'm going to start with the depth rod. So the first thing to do would be to lock in the hub underneath the table so we can install our depth rod. Whenever we calibrate rods or insert rods into the Sidewinder 2, one thing we have to do is lock the internal hub, and the way we do that is we insert an Allen wrench through the hole just behind the vices for the depth rods, or we insert the same Allen wrench in this small hole just in front of where the space rod goes when we're inserting or removing a space rod. There's a hub inside the machine that'll rotate that the rods need to thread onto, and so to prevent that from rotating, we have to lock it in place with a 3/32 Allen wrench. So the way we'll do that, pull the carriage out so we have a little bit of room, and that hole is located. The easiest way to find it, move the carriage all the way to the left and come back about a 1/4 inch or so, and that'll drop right down in there. And we'll take another view of it from overhead. And so as you can see right now, inside the hole it's just a piece of aluminum. Move that to the left slightly, and there's our small hole on the hub on the underside of the table. For the space rod, I push the carriage all the way to the back, and I just come forward slightly, and we'll see that opening inside there. We'll insert our Allen wrench there. And again, what that does, the end of all of our space and depth rods are threaded, and that hub inside is just a threaded piece of material, and that allows us to turn the hub on, or the rod onto the hub without it rotating. Look for the little opening in the table. Here's our Volkswagen depth rod. Our 2 Allen screws at the throat of the Volkswagen depth rod are loose. Of course, the rod's got a V stamped into it, so we know it's for Volkswagen. The end of our hub is loose, and we want about 1/8 of an inch gap in there. So we're just going to slide that in. We've got our hub locked, and we're going to use a flat screwdriver to turn that in. One thing we don't want to do is just turn it in by hand, or we'll close up our gap and lose that. So I'm going to just slide it in like that. And turn the rod in with a flat screwdriver until it comes to a complete stop. And that's as far as we can go. Okay, before I tighten up my thumb screw and set my rod for a number 1 depth, I'm going to install my Volkswagen setup key in the machine. I'm just going to lay that flat. I'm going to use the side that's got the pre-cut at the head of the key. Lay that flat in the vise, tighten it up. And then I'm going to bring the key in and pick out some cut part on the key. Go all the way down to the bottom, and then just rise up just a touch. I want the guide to be low enough to remain in the channel, but not drag on the bottom of the key. Next, I'm going to tighten up my thumb screw and engage my depth rod. So I'm on a number 1 position, and I need to make sure the number 1 depth position on the depth rod and the number 1 cut on the side of the key align. So if I push forward right now, I can't move my guide up the keyway or up the slot in the key. So what I need to do is use my screwdriver and turn that back until I can slide my guide up that slot. And I want to just barely touch the left side of that channel. When I do, my rod is calibrated correctly. And now I'm beginning to feel a little bit of pressure as I go up and down the key. And so that's where we're going to leave our rod, and that is properly calibrated. We'll also do a little bit closer view of this. So again, I'm just going to keep turning the screw in the end of the depth rod until I can slide up and down that channel. And then I want to get to a point where the left side of the guide is touching the right side of the key. I'm just going to slide that back and forth until I feel a little bit of pressure, and I'm at that point now. So my rod is calibrated. And at this point, I'm going to snug up my Allen screws at the throat of my rod. And then I'm going to give them a little bit more of a tightening just to secure them in place. That rod's calibrated now. Next thing I would need to do is move on to the space rod. So to do that, I'm going to remove my setup key, disengage my thumb screw, insert my Allen wrench into the table, and remove the depth rod. Now we're going to move on to the space rod alignment. So I'll move my carriage forward, bring it back slightly, drop my 3/32 Allen wrench in, and again, here's my space rod. Allen screws are loose at the throat of the rod. I have about 1/8 of an inch gap in my adjustment. Install that in the machine. And turn it in with the screwdriver. Remove my Allen wrench. Next step will be to install my setup key again. And again, this time we're going to know that we're in the first position properly because we have a deep cut in the first position on the setup key. When I can move my carriage back and forth in that slot, I know I'm calibrated properly. So after we install the setup key, we need to move our carriage forward. And go right up the slot in the key till we get to our number 1 position. So now I'm in my number 1 position, and if you look at the setup key, I'm unable to move that as far left and right as I should be able to. As you can see, I can't quite go as far to the left as I need to close that gap up, or to go all the way back and forth on that slot. So I'm just going to start rocking back and forth, and at the same time I'm going to turn my flat screwdriver in the end of the space rod. Go counterclockwise to get the key to go more in. And at that point I can go back and forth without any problem. So my rod is now calibrated properly. I'm going to snug up my Allen screws. And give them another quarter turn just to tighten them up. That finishes my calibration for the Volkswagen depth and space rod set.